Have you ever wondered why the wealthiest people you know seem to spend more money than everyone else? Today I'm going to completely flip your understanding of what it means to be cheap versus what it means to be smart with money. Because here's the truth that nobody talks about. Being cheap is actually costing you thousands of dollars every single year, and I'm going to prove it to you with real numbers and examples that will change how you think about every purchase decision you make. Most people think frugality and being cheap are the same thing. They're not even close. In fact, they're complete opposites. And confusing them is one of the biggest financial mistakes you can make. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why cheap decisions are expensive decisions, and more importantly, you'll know how to spot the difference so you can start making choices that actually build wealth instead of destroying it. Let's start with something everyone can relate to. Shoes. I know someone who buys $20 shoes from discount stores every few months because they fall apart quickly. Over 2 years, they spend about $160 replacing cheap shoes. Meanwhile, their friend bought a $150 pair of quality boots that lasted 5 years. Who made the smarter financial decision? The math is obvious, but this pattern shows up everywhere in our lives, and most people don't even realize it's happening. This isn't just about shoes, though. This mindset affects every area of your financial life, from the tools you buy to the food you eat, the insurance you choose, and even the relationships you build. Each cheap decision compounds over time, creating a financial trap that keeps you spending more money while getting less value. Think about your morning coffee routine. The person who buys the cheapest coffee maker available spends $30 up front, but replaces it every 8 months when it breaks. Over 5 years, that's $225 plus the frustration of constantly dealing with broken equipment. Compare that to someone who invests $120 in a reliable coffee maker that lasts 7 years. The expensive option costs half as much in the long run, plus you get better coffee and peace of mind. But here's where it gets really interesting. The cheap mindset doesn't just cost you money on individual purchases. It actually trains your brain to make decisions based on immediate cost rather than long-term value. This creates a pattern of thinking that keeps you trapped in expensive cycles across every area of your life. Let me give you a perfect example with car maintenance. The cheap approach is to skip regular oil changes and maintenance to save money today. A single oil change might cost $40, so skipping it seems like a win. But engine damage from neglected maintenance can cost thousands of dollars to repair or require replacing the entire vehicle years earlier than necessary. The person trying to save $40 ends up spending $40,000 sooner than they need to. This same pattern shows up with health decisions. Eating cheap processed food saves money at the grocery store, but leads to higher medical bills, less energy, and potentially shorter lifespan. The upfront savings get completely wiped out by the long-term costs, but we don't connect these dots because the consequences happen months or years later. Here's what really separates wealthy thinking from poor thinking. Wealthy people understand that price and cost are two completely different things. Price is what you pay up front. Cost is what you pay over time when you factor in replacement, maintenance, opportunity cost, and all the hidden expenses that come with cheap decisions. Let's talk about tools since this affects almost everyone. The person who buys a $15 drill from a discount store to hang pictures ends up buying 3 more drills over the next few years as each one breaks. They spend $60 total and waste hours dealing with broken tools and making extra trips to the store. Someone who invests $80 in a quality drill, uses it for decades, gets better results, and actually spends less money overall. But tools are just the beginning. This principle applies to everything from kitchen appliances to clothing, electronics, and even digital subscriptions. The pattern is always the same. Cheap upfront cost leads to higher total cost over time. Now let's talk about something that might surprise you. Being cheap with your time. Time is your most valuable asset, and cheap decisions often waste enormous amounts of it. Spending 2 hours driving across town to save $5 on groceries means you're valuing your time at $2.50 per hour. If you could use those 2 hours to learn a new skill, work on a side project, or spend time with family, the opportunity cost of that cheap decision is massive. I see this all the time with people who spend entire weekends clipping coupons to save $20 on groceries. If those same people invested that time in learning about investing, starting a side business, or developing skills that could increase their income, they'd make hundreds or thousands more dollars instead of saving $20. This brings us to one of the most expensive forms of being cheap: avoiding investments in yourself. The person who won't spend money on books, courses, or skill development because they're too expensive is making the ultimate cheap mistake. Education and self-improvement have the highest return on investment of anything you can buy, but cheap thinking focuses on the upfront cost rather than the lifetime value. Consider someone who won't spend $200 on a course that could help them earn an extra $1,000 per month. They're so focused on saving $200 that they miss out on $12,000 per year in additional income. That's the difference between cheap thinking and wealthy thinking right there. Let's examine this with insurance, which perfectly illustrates how being cheap backfires. Choosing the absolute cheapest insurance with high deductibles and minimal coverage seems smart until you need it. One accident or health issue can create financial devastation that costs tens of thousands more than the premium savings. Wealthy people understand that insurance is about transferring risk, not just saving money on monthly payments. The food industry provides another clear example. Cheap processed foods might cost less per meal, but they often leave you hungry sooner, provide less nutrition, and can lead to health problems that cost far more than the grocery savings. Quality whole foods keep you satisfied longer, provide better nutrition, and support long-term health that saves money on medical expenses. Here's where it gets psychological. Being cheap often stems from scarcity mindset, which actually creates more scarcity. When you're constantly focused on saving every penny, you make decisions based on fear rather than value. This leads to choices that seem safer in the moment but are actually riskier in the long term. The wealthy understand that sometimes you have to spend money to save money. They buy quality items that last longer, invest in preventive maintenance, and pay for convenience when their time is worth more than the cost. This isn't about being wasteful or showing off. It's about making mathematical decisions based on total cost rather than upfront price. Let me share a framework for making these decisions. Always calculate the cost per use or cost per year rather than just looking at the sticker price. A $300 jacket that lasts 10 years costs $30 per year. A $60 jacket that lasts 1 year costs $60 per year. The expensive jacket is actually half the price when you do the real math. This applies to everything from gym memberships to software subscriptions. The person who won't pay for quality productivity software but spends hours fighting with free alternatives is making a cheap decision that costs them time and money. Their hourly wage makes the premium software practically free when compared to the time wasted on inferior tools. Here's another costly form of cheap thinking: buying multiple cheap solutions instead of one quality solution. Instead of buying a good knife that lasts decades, people buy set after set of cheap knives that need constant replacement. Instead of investing in quality luggage, they buy cheap suitcases that break during travel and cause expensive problems. But the most expensive cheap mistake might be in relationships and networking. The person who's cheap with tips, gifts, or investing in social connections often finds themselves isolated when they need help most. Building relationships requires investment, and being cheap in this area costs opportunities that are worth far more than the money saved. So how do you break free from expensive cheap thinking? Start by changing your question from "what's the cheapest option" to "what's the best value for my situation?" Consider the total cost of ownership, including time, maintenance, replacement, and opportunity cost. Look at cost per use over the item's lifetime rather than just the upfront price. Before making any purchase decision, ask yourself, will this choice cost me more money in the long run? Will it waste my time? Will it prevent me from achieving bigger goals? If the answer is yes to any of these questions, the cheap option is actually the expensive option. Remember, true wealth isn't about having money. It's about making decisions that give you more time, more opportunities, and more freedom. Cheap decisions often take away all three of these things, making you poorer even if you spend less money up front. The goal isn't to spend money carelessly or buy the most expensive option for everything. The goal is to understand the difference between price and value, between cheap and frugal, between saving money and building wealth. When you start making decisions based on long-term value rather than short-term cost, everything changes. Your future self will thank you for every quality decision you make today, and your bank account will reflect the compound benefits of choosing value over cheapness. Stop making expensive, cheap mistakes and start making investments that actually build the life you want.